Hello and welcome to episode 153 of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, thank you so much for dressing up for us this week, and how are you?
You're welcome, and I'm fine. I'm happy. This is my last day of teaching. I've been teaching...
Ever?
Well, it depends on who you ask.
I was like, no, he's not that happy. he seems happy, but not that happy.
This was a long day, so I'm happy to be at this end of it. But
How-
I'll have to tell you, so today was a red letter day, because we just had this interview with Dave Krehbiel, which you're about to hear, which was awesome, and then my last teaching duty of the semester that's not grading was to interview Keith Lockhart.
There you go.
Spoke to our remote performance class. He got his master's from CMU. He was just incredibly generous and had just really cool perspective on what's going on in the COVID, dealing with all of this stuff. So it was just interesting to hear someone at that level talk about it.
This is proof that it doesn't really matter who you are in the music business. You can end up interviewing important people.
Who knew?
Who knew? Two in one day.
That's right. Joke's on somebody.
What a conversation we just had with Dave Krehbiel.
Fascinating. Yeah, I was
auditioning for
so
Reiner.
Many directions. Yeah.
Like playing with Herseth.
And then just this sort of deep stuff. Deep kind of
he's
spiritual
He's writing a second book. This one's on spirituality. This was one of my favorites.
It was really, it was a cool one.
Yeah, this one we barely had time to breathe in, so just because it just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, which was awesome. Yeah, really great stuff. Hey, Lance, tell the people about the Papert people.
The Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne University is a fine school of music at a fine institution in a fine city known as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if you're interested in finding out about the brass programs or who you could study with, you can click on the link in the show notes below, and you'll be taken to...
you can.
Yeah, you better. And you'll be able to find out all about the Mary Papert School of Music. They have been a longtime sponsor of the show, and we appreciate it very much. And very special thanks to Jim, I Would Eat Hindemith Sandwich, Nova, for making that possible.
That will make sense in about 45 minutes if you keep listening. So nothing like throwing an inside joke in the intro that comes from the actual. That's good stuff.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Houchin Horns, our brand new sponsor. And
so
then we'll
happy
get to
to
the main event here.
Houchin Horns. This is, I think, the third episode that they've been one of our sponsors, and we're very, very happy to have them on board. Want to encourage you to visit their website. Houchin Horns, if you're worried, they have newly expanded policies that make it easier to purchase and test drive the best equipment during a time when safety and staying home are top priorities. Which one is a higher priority to you, safety or staying home?
Staying home.
Yeah, me too. 15-day money-back guarantee with free shipping on all new instruments and accessories with multiple easy financing options on all inventory. Terms and conditions apply. They have a free in-person virtual equipment. You can get a free consultation with one of the team of professional musicians. And repairs and customizations are in-house. And if you enter the promo code Junkies11, I wonder why 11? Are there 10 other Brass Junkies shows that we don't know about?
They're not Brass Junkies. They
just
only
junkies.
Advertise on podcasts that have the word junkies in them. Like
Toaster Junkies. Welcome back to
macrame
Toaster
junkies.
Macrame Junkies. But enter the promo code Junkies11 at online checkout to receive $500 off your purchase of a new instrument from HouchinHorns.com. That's HouchinHorns.com. Please go visit them. Thank you very much to Houchin Horns for being one of our sponsors.
The bonus episode with Dave was great. You can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to get access to that and to get access to bonus episodes with Jens Lindemann and Sam Palafian and Chanel Critchlow, who we interviewed last week, who was phenomenal. There's 60 bonus episodes up there for your listening and viewing, at least all the recent ones since we went video. enjoyment. So without further ado, let us get to the conversation that we had with horn legend Dave Krehbiel. And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by a horn legend. Now, we call most of our guests legends just because it, kind of like eases them, kind of kissing up to him. But this is an actual legend. Like, this is like a real life, like if there is, I don't think there's a certified, I don't think you get a certification. If there was, he would be certified legend of the horn. And this is Dave Krehbiel. Dave, how are you?
I'm really good, and hopefully I'm not certified.
We'll how about we'll decide that at the end of the hour. So
let's take a secret ballot.
I don't know where to start with you. I mean, you've got a book out that we are going to talk. Well, let's just start right there. You released a book on just September 1st. So some of us are not feeling that productive during this whole coronavirus thing, and you're like, I'm going to release a memoir. So making us feel bad. But tell us about this book.
Oh boy, well, I don't know where to start. The book is called Through the Door, and it has to do with all the wonderful opportunities that I was serendipity in being involved in, and just being there at the right time. And it's interesting because I got a call from Dale Clevenger this afternoon, just a few hours ago, and he'd heard about the book and he wanted to know about it. Anyway, we're old friends and we did some stuff together, but we started talking about our lives, and he's in the same place I am, and our lives were really parallel. He's also, like me, just in awe of the times that we lived in and the opportunities that were given to us. And I'll tell you a story that the reason the book is called Through the Door is because a few years ago, I went to a concert near my hometown in Fresno, and it was the Westminster Choir. And the conductor's name was Joe Miller. And he was a pretty young guy. And this is the most amazing, wonderful choir concert I've ever heard. I was just blown away by it. And so he happened to mention that he started his career, his life, as sort of a junior choir conductor at Stanislaus State, which is a small state university up the road from us. And so I was fascinated. I wonder, how did this person who started at those humble beginnings sort of end up at the top of his game in profession, conducting this wonderful choir and doing concerts at the New York Philharmonic, et cetera, et cetera. So I waited for him after the concert, and I found him and I asked him, how did this happen? And he looked at me and he said, the doors just opened and I walked through them. And I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. Maybe I should write a book about it. Anyway,
wonderful.
I'm looking at these opportunities and how they happen and how I was able to somehow shuffle my way through these doors. And that's the book. It's pretty interesting. It goes into a lot of detail about how to survive under maximum pressure.
So how long did it take you to write?
About a year.
Yeah.
I had a friend that helped me. I'm dyslexic, so the spelling is a problem. I can put the words together fine, but I have no concept of spelling anything. So she helped me and she typed it, and it was pretty easy. I've started the second book because I had so much fun doing the first one. And the second book is telling about all the life stories of my actual spiritual journey, starting as a young indoctrinated Christian person and going from that all the way through agnosticism and all the things I did, channeling and AA and I don't know how many things, and finally ending up back after retirement in the same place that I started, but realizing that things had changed completely, and the people that I am connected with now in this church are absolutely wonderful and progressive. It started by we started when I retired. There was a war was just starting, and we had what we called the Reedley Peace Center, and we were a protest group, and we were protesting the war. And so I made connection with these people again, and realized that I'd changed, and the people had changed, and the church wasn't anything like I thought it would be, and it was very progressive in that we accept everybody, and there's no anyway. It's been quite a journey. So that's the new book is about the many permutations of my life, going through these different I can't say beliefs, but searching for something that I could believe in,
And now, have you been writing your whole life? My brother is dyslexic as well, and I know that's been a real challenge for him, and it just frustrated the daylights out of him to the point that he just didn't enjoy doing that at all. Did that? I mean, what's
no?
your...
It didn't affect my writing. I mean, I can put together pretty good sentences and paragraphs, and I know where I'm going. The only problem is I just can't spell.
The actual spelling, yeah.
No, and it has to do. I remember being really frustrated as a kid in school because I could not remember the multiplication tables. Just no way. And I was talking to somebody just recently, and they are also dyslexic, and they told me that this is the reason I had problems trying to learn a foreign language. I tried to learn German, but none of those words would stick, and I couldn't figure out why, and now I know why. So this is a handicap that I covered up all those years, and because I thought it was because I wasn't smart enough.
As my brother faced the same thing. That was
Yeah.
just like gutting to realize after after they finally diagnosed it, to understand that it wasn't his fault at all, and he just thought I can't do it. So is there forget my ignorance on this, but is there a correlation between, I mean, how is it that you were able to play music at such an incredible level for such a long time? Is there no relationship between is there no impact from the dyslexia standpoint on music playing?
I don't know. I know that's what saved me in the music world has been my feelings for music, and I've always been very aware of the emotional value of music, and not really worried about the intellectual part of it. That just came. No, it's music has been my out, my my way out of feeling inferior because of the dyslexia. I guess I could say that. And no, I don't think. Well, I mean, I didn't have a great memory. I wouldn't try to memorize a Hindemith horn concerto, for example, but I knew the Strausses and the Mozarts, and I could stand up in front of everybody and play those. But I never pushed it past that.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, I listen to stuff on the radio, and I could probably play that orchestra part without music.
Isn't that fascinating?
Sing along with it.
So let's go back in time, and you studied with Phil Farkas, which is crazy to me. To talk to us about that. You transferred to Northwestern in order to do that, correct?
I did, yeah. That's a big part of the front part of the book, and that's really how I got into Chicago Symphony. Is I was a advanced player in college. First 3 years, the freshman year, I joined the Fresno Philharmonic, which has just been formed and that was the third horn, and my teacher, Jim Winter, was the first horn. So I got experience there. And then he left in my sophomore year to finish his doctor's degree at Iowa. So I, as a sophomore, became the principal horn of this newly formed orchestra. And that's part of the story too. This is where I remember very vividly playing Pavane for a Dead Princess. Horn solo starts out pretty high. And being so nervous that I played it, but at the end I fainted. I actually fainted.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
Because of the nerves, I guess. And the second horn player had a hold of my shoulder so I wouldn't fall off the chair until I woke up. So I mean, that's where you start. That's sort of the basis of the book, is figuring out how to deal with that kind of anxiety and pressure. And
wow. And that was after you had already played it.
mm-hmm.
Wow.
Just when I finished, just the last note, I just beep right out.
Wow.
That's and so what was it like studying with Farkas?
Well, it's interesting because I could play. I had played a couple of performances of the Britten Serenade, and I was sort of this young virtuoso kind of horn player. And my teacher, Jim Winter, who was a wonderful teacher and who was actually president of the International Horn Society for quite a while, said, no, you got to go to a big city and you've got to study with my teacher, Farkas. So I transferred in my senior year, and I showed up there as a hick from the boondocks, being totally intimidated by the city and being totally intimidated by the Chicago Symphony, going to those concerts and hearing that level of performance and what was going on there. And I mean, remember definitely thinking, oh my God, I'll never be at that level. I'll never be able to do that. But what I didn't realize was that Farkas never thought of me as a student. You know, we have students and we get them as freshmen or younger than that. And even though we try to forget the level that they started at, it's still part of them, and we think of them in that way. But if you have a student that comes to you that's really accomplished right away, you know, it sort of becomes like almost like a colleague. Like, so the lessons were never really student teacher too much, but you know, let's have fun doing this. And I remember definitely that playing the Gallet unmeasured etudes, where you have to figure out how you're going to phrase it and what you're going to do. There's no help from and he and I would play those and we'd negotiate. And sometimes I'd win and sometimes he had a better idea than mine, you know, and we just sort of, I loved to tell jokes and he loved to hear jokes, and he had a great sense of humor. And so we were just almost, I always thought maybe I was kind of like the son he never had. He had 3 daughters. And I was just young enough under his age that that would have been possible. And he was comfortable with me. Well, what happened was right around Christmas time, he asked me, he said, are you going home to California for Christmas? I said, no, I can't afford to go. I mean, money was a big issue. I was staying working in the bookstore. And he says, well, good, you'll be around. There might be an audition. I said, well, what's the audition for? He says, well, I can't tell you. Well, a couple of days later, I got a phone call. It says, you need to show up at a certain time in the morning, 10 o'clock, to have an audition for the Chicago Symphony with Fritz Reiner. And I thought, what? I'm going, you know, there's no way. I thought, there's no way. I know all the stories. Miss one note, you're through. And, you know, if you show any weakness at all, I'd heard all the stories. And
did you sleep at all that
night? I knew I wasn't at that level, but okay, I'll show up. So I walked into his apartment, and he had this low, growly voice. He says, hello, Krehbiel. So I went and sat down in his studio, and I said, well, what would you like to hear, Dr. Reiner? And he growled at me, he says, play Heldenleben. God, you know, he looked just like Bela Lugosi in the films, if you know who Bela Lugosi is. You know, and he had this hump in the back of his neck. He's scary as hell. Anyway, but I thought, I'm looking at him, I said, this guy looks a little like my uncle. Maybe I shouldn't be afraid of this guy. Anyway, so I sat down, I took out my horn, and the first note of Heldenleben is a low B flat. And it was cold, and my horn was cold. And so I never was really that great at the low register anyway. So I tried to play that first note, and just air came out. You know, it didn't speak,
No
lips
kidding.
didn't vibrate. So I thought, well, okay, that's it. I've done the audition's over. You know, I failed this audition, so I can just have fun now. So I played the rest of the audition. I don't know if it was perfect, but I played it. But with all the pressure was gone because I had already failed the audition. Anyway, so but the story is, after I tried to play that first note and it didn't speak, he goes over to his counter there and he picks up a brand new, hot off the press, just published copy of Farkas's book, The Art of Horn Playing.
Mm-hmm.
Through this book, I'll never forget it. And he thumps through there and he stops and he looks at the book and he looks at me and he says, your teacher says you must loosen the arm brochure for the low notes. Well, you know, if something doesn't speak, you just need a second chance. And I hadn't played a note or warmed up. So I played the low B flat then, and I played Heldenleben, and it was fine. But the pressure was gone because I'd already failed. So I left, and I thought, well, that's the end of that. And pretty soon I got a couple days later, I got a phone call. Says, well, you're a new member of the Chicago Symphony. Would you come down and play extra? Stokowski is there, and he needs some extra horns for Ilya Muramet's Symphony by Glier. Anyway, so all of a sudden I'm sitting in the Chicago Symphony, and later on I sort of pieced together how that happened. I mean, again, the doors just opened. I pieced together that evidently Reiner, and this is the days before we had committees and all that, the conductor just chose somebody. And he'd listen to somebody maybe with the personnel manager, and then they decide to put him in the orchestra. Well, Reiner had somebody in the horn section that he didn't trust anymore. The guy was kind of nervous, and Reiner wanted him out, but they persuaded Reiner to keep him because he had a family. And so Reiner wanted somebody that he could trust. And so Reiner said to Farkas, evidently, I'm going to New York and hire a horn player. And Farkas was evidently deathly afraid of having a New York horn player because he'd had New York horn players before, and they were no help in that they sort of looked down their nose at Chicago and what Farkas was doing. And Farkas needed a lot of support. He was an incredible perfectionist, and he needed somebody on his side next to him. And he figured I was that one. So evidently he told Reiner about me, and Reiner said, fine, hire him. And Farkas, being the astute politician that he was, said, oh no, Dr. Reiner, you have to hear him. In case I didn't work out, it wasn't all his fault. He got up to it. So anyway, that's how the audition happened. That's how I showed up in the Chicago Symphony. Now, go figure the odds of something like that happening, somebody coming from the boondocks in California and showing up and being there a couple of months and ending up in the Chicago Symphony. Anyway, so after that happened, for the first time in my life, I really got serious about the horn. I was just going on raw talent before that, but all of a sudden I realized I don't have the consistency. I mean, one day I could really play well, and the next day not so good. You know, I'd be stiff, or you know, I've always said if your chops are tired, it's like being a runner. If your legs cramp up, you don't fix that by running more. You let it rest, right? You careful. Anyway, so I went down to the basement and I decided I had to figure out how to get this consistency and how to have ease of playing, how to slur. I just slurred. I didn't really, and I asked Farkas, I said, well, would you help me with this? How can I do this? And Farkas says, don't change anything, kid. You got the audition. You're in the orchestra, you know.
Well, it is kind of funny that you won the position in the Chicago Symphony, and then you decided, you know what, maybe I better take this a little more seriously.
Isn't that weird? There's no way that can happen now with all the talent out there and the level of players. That's another favorite thought of mine is you're a tuba player. I often thought, the level of orchestra players now and the level of people who come to audition is phenomenal. And there's a great danger of getting in an orchestra and just being bored to death. And I thought, you have a tuba audition. What you do is you hire the third or fourth best guy, because the best guy, he wants to be a soloist, and he's going to be bored silly. He doesn't like the bass trombone player, and he doesn't want to blend with the basses. He wants to be a soloist. He wants to play horn concertos an octave lower and make records and do stuff, And so he's going to have a miserable life there. So the second guy may be so, but the third or fourth guy, he's going to love. He's very well qualified. He's going to sound wonderful. He's going to love blending with the bass trombone and blending with the basses and being the bottom of an orchestra. And he's going to want to hang out with the stage crew and work on his car back at the auditorium, and just be a regular guy, go fishing and hunting and, that kind of stuff. And I think that's a great danger. And I've often thought, you're sitting in the orchestra and you look down and there's the violin section and there's two guys sitting on a stand and playing the same music, the same part. One guy's in heaven and the other guy's in hell. One guy is loving this, being part of this thing, and the other guy's not. This is really, I should have been a soloist. I should be in a string quartet. I should be out in the concert stage, So the question is, how do we manage these jobs in a sane way so that it's so that we're healthy and excited and productive and not negative?
And so what's the recipe?
Well, I call it creative, not caring. You have to not care what you just did and not care what you're going to do, but be present in the moment, be totally absorbed by that moment in time when you're playing that particular note or that particular passage. And that was my secret to stage fright and anxiety and so on. Is when I started to get nervous, I realized that I was projecting something that was going to happen or something that just did happen, and I wasn't being right there at the time.
You were either in the future worrying about a thing or in the past worrying about a thing that had happened.
Yeah.
Well, this is where it's so interesting and logical that you would then move on to a book about spirituality. Exactly the deeper you get into this, the music side, then the more you realize how much of a bridge there is there.
Yeah, it's been a gift. What an adventure. It's just the same kind of adventure of discovering why we're here and the purpose of life in the first place.
I saw Don Green has written endorsed your book and wrote a really nice quote, and that he and others, Noah Kageyama, there is a Jeff Nelson, actually one of your fellow hornists, have
Yeah.
spent a lot of time and effort and research and created a lot of really useful materials for people to deal with performance anxiety and these sorts of issues. Now, I'm imagining that, like, what sort of resources did you have to draw on except the gray matter behind your eyeballs? I mean, were you able to get advice from anybody, or you were just having to sort out, like, how were people dealing with performance anxiety?
Well, back then, this was a kind of, it wasn't talked about. You know, it was sort of a taboo. And it's like a disease that people had. Some people had it and others didn't have it. And I always thought it's so much related to the ego. Your performance anxiety is worrying that your ego is going to be injured because, you know, I had this dream just recently about being in an orchestra with a large chorus, and it was a big piece, and we got to this place and there was a passage that I couldn't play, and everything stopped. Everybody looked at me, and we tried it again, and I still couldn't play it. So they walked me off the stage. I was done. And so that anxiety, performance anxiety, is still there. To have a dream like that, I realized. I mean, I got to the place in my playing where I remember driving to concerts in Chicago with Reiner, hoping I'd be in an auto accident so I wouldn't have to go on stage. And my last 10, 15 years in San Francisco, I could hardly wait to get there. It was so much fun. You know, so I sort of solved that problem for me. Of course, there were still moments when there's anxiety and you're worried, but generally my attitude was, man, am I lucky to have this job? I think yeah, go ahead.
No, please. I was gonna circle back if we could, and I could talk about the performance anxiety thing for a long time because it's fascinating. I recently heard that getting nervous is simply experiencing failure in advance, which I thought was really profound. And it's like experiencing failure even when you don't end up failing, you know. And I think that there's even been studies that you actually go through the physiological experience of failing, even if it doesn't end up coming to, you know, it doesn't even happen. But I'm just wondering a little bit more about Reiner. I mean, he's got such a reputation for being a terror, and you seem to be echoing that. But what was a typical, if you will, like, you know, rehearsal or concert, or, you know, what was it like under him?
The rehearsals were harder than the concerts because in the concerts, he's not going to stop. In the rehearsals, if he didn't like something, he'd stop and do it over again until he could be reassured or assured that you could do it. I remember him doing that with Herse, the famous story of Zarathustra, where he was testing Herse. He wanted to see if he could actually get under his skin a little bit, so he kept repeating the trumpet call Zarathustra, and each time he repeat, it was a ruse. He'd sort of go back one letter and rehearse the strings and get to this trumpet call. He did about 4 times, and each time Herse played it louder and better. And under his breath, I could hear him cursing back there. You know? Anyway, so that was the ultimate test. But if he sensed somebody could, I remember him going after the principal overplayer, Ray Still, because one of his a low note didn't speak in a solo, and Reiner stopped and he says, "Mr. Still, do you want Mr. Saruchek, the second hobo, to play that note for you?" And Ray, no, absolutely not. Bam, you know. And I realized then that with Reiner, the best defense is a very strong offense. If you showed any weakness at all, he was after you like a piranha.
Wow.
But if you fought back and, you know, showed straight. No, I can do that. And I had one instance that happened to me in a recording, a Wagner recording where I was playing Wagner tuba. And I had this terrible old Wagner tuba, Italian instrument. This is before the days of these great Wagner tubas that people are making now. And the F sharp concert, the C sharp on the 2 and 3 combination didn't center at all. It was just like that, you know. And that one note in the Wagner Funeral March, and it didn't come out. And so that was in the days when they couldn't fix it like they can fix everything now. And so everything stopped and we had to repeat it. And the second time it didn't come out, I got a second chance. And I thought, uh-oh, this is it for me, I'm out. We did it one more time and it came out. And that's the closest I ever came to being walked off the stage.
Wow.
But let me talk about, I mean, this sort of baptism under fire, the power of this orchestra and that conductor. He only gave responsibility. He never took responsibility. If things were shaky, he'd just quit conducting and stare around over his half moon glasses with this evil eye. So I always thought he's like a great general who delegates responsibility. He's not like a first sergeant pushing the troops around and managing that. He's giving responsibilities, making you responsible. So it was really difficult to be at that level. It was mass chamber music all the time. But when you did it after the concert, you realized you'd really done something. And I had this dream, I had it a couple of times, that Reiner had passed away, had died, and they froze him in a giant block of ice, solid, clear ice. And it was like a 2 by 2 block of ice, 6 feet tall. And
a Reiner sickle.
Yeah. And we played this concert, and the stage crew guy, Johnny Klima, put him on a dolly, a little push dolly, and wheeled him out and tipped him up on the podium and faced him toward us. And we played this whole concert with him not just frozen solid in this block of ice. And it was the greatest concert ever because it was music. But his essence, his power was still there. And I thought, wow, that's an amazing dream.
Even your made up stories are amazing. This is great. There you go.
I was Reiner. He was cold.
So he had a sense of humor. This is a story in my book. Dick Lottridge was the contrabassoon player, and he, on a contrabassoon, when you're down that low, nobody's going to tell you, and nobody's going to know if it's an F or an F sharp. It doesn't matter. It's just so much vibration.
I love that instrument.
Anyway,
yeah.
so
it's all about enthusiasm.
Yeah. So he's this happy-go-lucky guy. He wasn't fazed by the tension in the orchestra. And we're walking up the stairs to a rehearsal. And it was a Tuesday morning rehearsal. The Monday night before that, it'd been a Fiedler concert for the 4-H kids. And for the 4-H kids, they put out all these flowers across the stage, really jazzed up the auditorium. So they couldn't have these flowers on stage for a Reiner rehearsal. It just wouldn't fit. So all these flowers were packed backstage. And, before they remodeled Orchestra Hall in Chicago, it was pretty cramped back there. And all these flowers were back there. And so Dick Lottridge and I are walking up the stairs, and Reiner's in his little cubbyhole dressing room with kind of standing there, just eyeballing everybody as they walked up the rehearsal, And Dick, being the happy-go-lucky guy, he says to Reiner, good morning, Dr. Reiner. He says, nice of them to leave these flowers here for us. And Reiner looked right at him, and he said, yes, those are for your funeral. Let's talk about a sense of humor.
That sounds like a movie.
Yeah, yeah, it could be.
So-
Anyway, so what a wonderful time that was. And, I had 5 years of that before I went out on my own and became a first horn in Detroit.
So before we get to Detroit, I wanted to very quickly thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker
All
Mouthpieces
right.
offers fine customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz artist model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke model euphonium mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Now, I bet on that crappy Wagner tuba, if you had had a Parker mouthpiece, you would have come out the
Would have
first
made the
time,
difference,
and yeah, you wouldn't have been sweating it that day.
I
But
wouldn't have had to go through that trauma. But then I would have missed something. That was quite an experience.
I bet, boy, I'm circling back in my head to the fact that you went in positive that if you missed a single note in your audition for Reiner, that you were done, and that you literally missed the first note. And
Yeah.
that then unlocked your inner musician. You were able to just do your thing, and you're right. Now you get a lot of credit for walking through the doors, but the door just opened, right? You suddenly the universe took the pressure off.
It did. And the other gift is that by Reiner opening this book and saying, "You must loosen the armature," and I was able to play the note, he thought, well, this kid's great. He takes directions. I showed him how to do it, and he did it. Well, maybe we can go with him.
I can mold this clay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had these wonderful experiences in my life like that. I mean, I could tell you the story of myself and Paul Hindemith, which
Please.
is in the book. Just before I left for Detroit, Frank Bragg and I had spent that year being co-principal in Chicago. And the manager had assured us that Dr. Reiner was going to, that he was very happy and satisfied with how the horns were, and that's what we were going to do. But strangely enough, I was out at Northwestern, and I found out from the assistant dean that he asked me if I knew this new horn player that was coming in, which was Clarendon Van Norman from the Met. And I said, what? Because the manager had assured Frank and I that we were going to do this next year and from then on. And I said, what? And the dean kind of clammed up, and he realized he shouldn't have said anything. So by investigating, I found out that Reiner had gone to New York and hired Van Norman to come in and be principal horn. And so, which meant that I would have to go back to assistant. And I just had a taste of what it was like to be principal for that year. And I didn't want to go back to being assistant. So again, the doors just opened. 2 jobs were open that spring, Pittsburgh and Detroit. So I played for both guys, and I got both jobs. And so I had to decide where to go. And I went to Detroit because I figured Steinberg and Pittsburgh had sort of a different first horn player every couple of years for many years. And I figured my chances of survival as really being a poor dyslexic first horn player were better in Detroit. So I chose Detroit. So I was not happy to be leaving Chicago Symphony, but I knew that I wasn't really ready to be that principal. I was okay on co-principal with Frank, who's a wonderful player, Frank Bragg, but I wasn't really ready to be a principal horn, I don't think, in Chicago Symphony. And so I wanted to see if I could do it. So I went to Detroit. The last concerts I played with Chicago were with Hindemith conducting. And I've always been a fan ever since I heard Symphonic Metamorphosis, the Hindemith piece that we played at Interlochen when I was there as a high schooler. Anyway, I had Hindemith sign some music, and I hung around as much as I could with him, and I was just, I was in awe of this guy. And he was really fun. He was wonderful. Anyway, I asked him once who his favorite composer was. And he said, besides me, Bruckner. Well, you know, if you know Hindemith and if you know Bruckner, you can see there's the linear quality of the music, and there's something about those two that resonate together for me. Anyway, it made perfect sense to me. So I was leaving Chicago, and one of the last concerts we played was in Milwaukee. The orchestra used to do runouts to Milwaukee. We take the train up there, and I played many pieces with him and with Hindemith. Anyway, we're coming back from that concert in Milwaukee on the train, and I just wanted to see him one more time because I knew that was going to be. And he died shortly after that. But so I walked through the train. And there he was, sitting at a table with his wife, and this manager and his wife sitting across from him at this table, and they were eating. So I come walking down the aisle, and he spots me, and he motions me to come over. And he says, a young man, he says, would you like a bite of my sandwich? He was eating a liverwurst sandwich. And I was still in awe of this. There's no way I could take a bite of the sandwich. And I said, oh, no, thank you. I was embarrassed. And anyway, he says, well, what are your plans? I says, well, I'm leaving the orchestra. I'm going to Principal Horn in Detroit. He looked at me, his eyes open and wide, and he turned to this manager who had lied to me. And he said, you're stupid. You're stupid. How could you let this man go from your orchestra? And he just chewed his ass out. Now, go figure a scenario like that. My hero, the person I looked up to more than just about anybody, and the person that I despised. I didn't think people in high places, I was young, people in high places, they don't lie, do they? They tell the truth. Welcome to the United States, and you know who. Anyway, I afterwards I thought, in my wildest dreams, dreaming up a scenario like that would be impossible, and yet it happened. Anyway,
I don't think anyone's ever that I wasn't blood related to has ever said, "Would you like a bite of my sandwich?" That's it's a very specific turn of phrase.
I think that's way before COVID, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
I think so. That
What
was like COVID 5. Yeah.
Oh, I thought of what I was going to tell Jens, but that's for later, huh?
Well, we could jump there. Let's do it. Do it.
Okay.
So as I'm sure that you are aware, our dear friend Jens Lindemann has been going through some CHOP problems for the last many years, and because we love him, right, Lance? Because
absolutely,
we love
go
him
with that.
We love him desperately.
He's pretty lovable.
He can be. he can be.
He has that capacity.
Yeah, he does. Yes. Most of us love him because we get to then hang out with his wife, who's amazing and talented and wonderful. But he can be lovable.
Beautiful.
So we are wondering if you're writing a book on spirituality. It seems like you might be the guy that could help Jens with these ongoing CHOP problems that he's having. So what is your advice for him, Dave?
Well, I was going to say, Jens, don't worry about COVID because you've got focal dystonia to worry about. But I could say, Jens, don't worry about focal dystonia because you've got COVID to worry about. It works both ways.
Wow, that's some four-dimensional chess, though. It's like right. you have so much to worry about that you shouldn't worry about any of it, really.
Exactly. Give it up.
It's the yin and yang of his problems. That's right. Yeah.
See,
he needs a little creative not caring.
There you go.
He's got half of that right.
Yeah, but see, but the problem is like he can't worry about the past and he can't worry about the future, but his current, which is job problems, is also terrible. So he's
Yeah.
just kind of like, yeah, not ideal. So we love you, Jens.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, just quit playing high notes. You'll be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. There you go. What would he do? Just
What?
wear loud jackets and tell jokes? I mean, he's like,
There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
no, I guess
I
not.
hope not.
I got yeah, exactly. Yeah, which granted, that sounds like my career at this point, minus the loud jackets. But anyway, but let's circle back to like we usually do Jens at the very end, but that just happened organically, exactly how it was supposed to, and we're getting towards the end here. But you and we are going to talk about in the bonus episode. We're going to talk about the fact I learned this today that you were in a rock band with Tom Bacon, which we're going to talk all about that in the bonus episode because that's blowing my mind. But I want to hear obviously about your time with the San Francisco Symphony because it was 26 years, right, that you were principal
Right.
horn.
Yeah.
And some of the absolute staples of the orchestral, like recorded repertoire. I mean, geez, I was raised on a number of those, of the real famous, San Francisco recordings. Like
Oh, yeah. With Blumstead, we did
Yeah.
all my favorite pieces.
Yeah, like the Nielsen's and
Nielsen's and Sibelius.
Oh, that's like
I even like Berwald.
there. It's the gold standard. I mean, I listened to your recording of Nielsen 5 so many times in high school and college that I haven't listened to it in probably a decade at this point. I might be able to close my eyes and literally hear that record play in my head right now. That's how familiar I am with it.
Huh?
Yeah.
I often thought about Nielsen, his symphonies just progress to the point. I think he wrote the first symphony and nobody paid much attention to, and then the second, and then the third. And he kept writing symphonies. He wasn't getting any stuff from it, Finally said, screw it, I'm going to really give it to him. So I'm going to write the symphony. I'm going to put in this big drum thing. I'm going to beat the heck out of it. I'm going to get their attention. Listen to this, you guys.
What does it say in the snare drum part? It says something like, try to, I mean, it basically tells, I'm sure Lance comes from, he's a euphonium player. He's like, he's the wind band side of things. There's this violent snare drum solo where you're basically supposed to try and derail the entire orchestra. There's just like this luscious bed of sound. And then there's just this snare noise. And then when that finally resolves and it's just like, and that recording is just, that's it.
Yeah.
That's
like
everything.
Nielsen's giving everybody the finger right there. That's what I say. Okay, you guys, listen to this.
Well, your version with that orchestra and Blomstead of Nielsen's middle finger is my favorite one. So there, you guys play the bird well. So, yeah. So what was it like when you? I mean, Detroit is an amazing symphony, but San Francisco, I mean, that's like San Francisco's the top of the heap, and you're finally like the principal horn of one of the biggest orchestras in the world. Did it just feel like a natural progression to get there, or was that a real moment in your career?
No, I grew up in California, and I could care less how the symphony, what level the symphony was at. I just wanted to get back to California with the relatives and my parents and my wife's parents and our kids, could hang out with their grandkids, and we'd be in California. And so the San Francisco Symphony back then wasn't much. Believe me, it was in conjunction with the San Francisco Opera. It was two separate orchestras by separate managements, but we played opera in the fall and then symphony in the spring.
I didn't know that.
And the level wasn't very good.
Huh.
Because I was one of the first people that they could import. The union in San Francisco was very close, and they didn't want any importees. They didn't want outside people coming in and taking jobs. So when I went there as a symphony musician, I wasn't allowed to play anything. They wouldn't let me play the opera. They wouldn't let me play any outside jobs at all. It was just the symphony. So Ado DeVart came in after Seiji left for Boston, and he started pushing on the symphony having its own hall next to the Opera House. And we did get a new hall, Davies Hall, and because of that, you had to decide whether you were going to go full-time with the opera or with the symphony. And so the symphony then, a lot of people went with the opera, and so there were many openings, and you know, the best people came. And so the whole level just went up until when Bromstead got there. I mean, it was a totally different orchestra than when I started there. And then with Michael too. I mean, anyway, yeah, it was in a way a disappointment when I first got there, but it turned out to be a real top-notch group, especially with Blomstead. I mean, the music he did and the way his sort of loving character of feeling the music, you know, you never got the idea that he was doing anything that wasn't from the heart. And this is the thing in Detroit. In Detroit, Sixten Ehrling was the conductor. That's the reason. That's the main reason I think we started the rock group, because we were so frustrated in Detroit that we felt like we were a music factory. There wasn't much emotion happening, and Sixten Ehrling, although he could conduct Rite of Spring without a score and never make a mistake and have it perfect, the idea of making a phrase and having something beautiful, he was all intellect and not much emotion. And so we were frustrated. We wanted to do something our own. So Tom and I and Irman Rowan, Bob Carr, and some people, we decided to have a rock group. So we put this thing together with our own music. Irv did most of the music, and we began rehearsing, and we had a hell of a good time. And we got a little place on Woodward Avenue where we went to Chicago to the instrument show, and custom company, Custom Amps, they believed in us. We told them, we're symphony musicians, but we want to be a rock group. And so I said, okay, good, here, have all this. They gave us organs and speakers and amplifiers and mics and thousands of dollars worth of stuff. We had these custom amps, you know, the pleated black Naugahyde stuff, you know. We had a truckload of that stuff. Anyway, so we had this rock group, and we got to where we thought we were ready to play a concert, and we started playing concerts, and we got our little costumes, and we got to play with the symphony. We had a piece that started out with Zarathustra, and then it turned into a rock group and a rock band. And the where we played back then was Ford Auditorium, and they had a pit that could raise, and you could raise up, and our rock band would be in the pit lowered.
Nice.
We would play 2001, and then the thing would raise up, and then we'd start. Anyway, we had a wonderful time with this rock group, and what I learned from it was that there's no limit. I never thought I could stand up and play a whole concert by memory like that, and singing and playing.
And what did you play?
Tired. I played horn and bass trumpet and a little bass, and sang. Tom didn't play any horn. He only played organ. He was the organ player. Anyway, I realized that, you know, we'd stay up all night. We'd go play a job and we'd have a motorhome, and we'd go out and play a job, and we'd get back just in time for the next morning's rehearsal with the symphony. And, you know, partying the whole time. And we could do it. You know, always I'd sort of thought, well, I've got to take naps and I've got to be careful. And I realized none of that, with the right attitude, none of that stuff, there's no limit to what you can do if you have the right attitude. Anyway, so it was a real wake-up call, and it was a wonderful experience. But by the time I left, well, I left in '72 to go to San Francisco, and some of the other guys were leaving. Dennis Smith left for LA, and Bob Cowart left for LA Phil, and the group finally kind of fizzled out. But in the meantime, we had a manager, a New York manager, and we made 2 records for London Records.
What's the name of the band?
Symphonic Metamorphosis.
Symphony. Okay, yeah. I missed it. Sorry.
And
No, it's great. That's my favorite part.
Did you ever hear any of it?
I have not.
Real.
I just learned it existed today.
You'd laugh because it's kind of quasi blood, sweat, and tears kind of thing, you know.
I bet I'll love it.
It's so dated now. I mean, I played some of it the other day, and it just cracked me up, you know. But we were true believers back then. We believed that we were having a wonderful time, and it was our thing, you know. And we realized that there's no limit to what can be done. There's so many stories from that time. I remember when the band was going really good, we were doing we were playing concerts at Meadowbrook, the summer home for Detroit, and my this young conductor was there. He was 10 years younger than me. Michael Tilson Thomas came as a guest conductor, and I said to Michael after the concert, you know, my friends and I in the rock band, we have a party after the concert, you know, open up the trunk and drink beer and, you know, hang out for a while. You want to come? He says, yeah, I'd love to come. So he came. And that was about the time that I started to think, well, conductors are real people too, you know, we've got to treat them that way. It's always been like from the Reiner years and wherever with Fixed and Early, it's like, hate the boss, you know, nobody likes the boss. And anyway, so years later, he became conductor. I was there 3 years with him. And he never failed to mention, whenever we were together, this invitation that I gave to him. It really touched him in a way, I think, that, you know, I've done enough conducting to know that it's the dark side and nobody likes the boss. And you don't really, you go to a different universe when you're a boss like that anyway. But the lesson was that, that in the music business, it's a very small world and you better treat everybody with respect because you never know when they're going to show up again in your life. And that was a big lesson. I had no idea, but I can't, you know. Anyway, with Michael, it was great.
Wow. I remember Sam told me a story once that he was partying late one night with Michael Tilson Thomas and Bernstein, and that the two of them were both hitting the sauce pretty heavily, and that they ended up getting into into like an ear training battle where like where like one of them, like some other person at the party was like putting their like forearm down on the piano, and like, you know, there was a competition between MTT and Bernstein to see who could identify more of the pitches that were sounding than the other, and it was like this, like,
oh god,
this, like, yeah, talk again like 4-dimensional chess, where Sam, who's got one of the best ears of any human I've ever been in the same room with, was just like in awe at these two completely plastered and identifying these, you know, like 18 note chord clusters, you know, and then one of them got 19 and then was talking trash. So yeah, pretty I found
the Symphonic Metamorphosis record is on YouTube, and I dig the record cover with you with butterfly wings is that's worth checking out.
This was the late 60s and 70s, you know. Things were different back then. You guys weren't even around yet, probably.
I was born in 67, so maybe my mom was into it. I don't know. It says an octet of classically trained musicians who were all members of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. The group later changed its name to Metamorphosis.
Oh, drop the symphonic, a little rebrand there. There you go. And you played at Tanglewood. Is that, did I read that as well?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy. I've been going to Tanglewood since I was my first concert. I was 2 weeks old for Tanglewood on Parade. Yeah,
wow.
Every summer of my entire life except for this summer, where there were of course no concerts. But yeah, 45 straight years. But I don't think I ever saw Symphonic Metamorphosis. But to be honest, I don't really remember what my parents dragged me to in the late 70s. I just kind of came along for the ride and then ate food. So. Well, this is wonderful. And I can't wait to dig further into your book and about your spirituality book. And as always, the links that we always mention are always in the show notes, as are Lance's Easter eggs, which is just what we call what we've rebranded his unhelpful show notes.
They're helpful. Just not to everyone.
Not to everyone. But boy, this was great. You've been on our list of, like when we put together a list of like all the people that it would be great to talk to. There's a lot of people, right? You were on that list, but then I got an email from you out of nowhere saying like, "Hey, I've heard great things about the entrepreneurial musician and about the Brass Junkies. If you'd ever be interested." And I was like, "Let me think about it." Yeah, we're interested. Like, of course we're interested. Great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And so I'm glad that we were able to make it happen. So,
well, it was really fun for me. It's always fun to rehash these old war stories and relive a wonderful life, really, and that I'm still. Did I tell you? I told you I talked to Dale today. Dale Clemson.
Yes.
And our lives, we feel so much the same, and our lives are so parallel in so many ways. There's a story that one of the ways Dale and I connected was. You have more time for the story?
Absolutely.
Well, in 1971, I think it was shortly before I left to go to San Francisco, it was the second International Horn Society meeting. It was just kind of a new thing. People were just figuring out how to do it. And so Dale and I shared a recital. We were solos at that workshop. And so I said to Dale, why don't we improvise a duet? And Dale says, I don't know. I never did anything quite like that. I said, well, that's okay. Neither have I, but let's do it. He says, well, we better rehearse. I said, no, we can't rehearse it. That'll ruin it. He said, well, what do we do? And I said, you start out, I'll follow you in, And so he starts out, boom, 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 all over, and I'm right behind him. We did this thing. And what I did was I put a whole bunch of music stands out in front and put a bunch of manuscript paper on the music stands. And then I told the audience, and the audience was Farkas, Wendell Haas, and all three of my teachers were there.
Wow.
And so I told the audience that we'd commissioned this work, but we had a lot of trouble getting together for rehearsal, but we're going to do the best we can. So Dale starts in, and then I follow him in, and we play for a while, just trilling and zipping up and down and doing all sorts of stupid stuff. And then I stop. He says, "Wait a minute, Dale, I think we're a bar off." And he says, "Yeah, I think you're right." So then he starts in again, and I start in behind him. I go behind him. And we had it worked out that when we got tired of doing that, we'd play till. He'd play it right side up, and I'd play it upside down. So we stopped, and we finished with it was a big hit, big hit. And Farkas came running up, and he said to me, he says, "That's great." He says, "I got to have a copy of that." I said, "Well, you can have the original. And he goes over, he looks, there's nothing on there. I said, you're damn right. I said, if that stuff was written, I'd never play it. And I could never play it. And knowing Farkas as well as I did, if something like that was written, he's about the only one that I know that would spend enough time to actually learn how to play it. He would do it, you know. So yeah. Anyway.
Amazing.
Yeah, I thought, well, that's the difference between he and I, really. Farkas and I'm lazy, and I would never learn something like that. And being an intellectual person that he is, he would have spent a lifetime figuring out how to play that thing.
I like how you just described it as following him in. When he started the duet, I imagined him like charging a line, you know, like in World War I, and you were following his lead with your bayonet drawn.
That's it. He started with the trill. I go. I heard a recording of that. I hadn't heard it in 40 years. I heard a recording of that the other day. Somebody dug up a copy of that from the horn workshop, and I always thought, boy, that's got to be crap. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Yeah,
love it. All right. Well, we are going to have Dave hang out here for the bonus episode, where I'm sure we're going to get some more good stories. I have a feeling he could tell us good stories until like a week from Saturday. So, but thank you so much for your time today. This has been wonderful. I'm really glad that we were able to make this happen.
Well, I always like to hang out with my friends from the low brass.
There you go.
Yeah, you know, my best friends have always been trombone players for some reason. You know, Bob Lambert, Dennis Smith, Miles Anderson, Mark Lawrence, always trombone players.
Oh, that's great. Good stuff. So if you want to hear Dave on the bonus episode, you can head to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, where a whole bunch of people already are patrons. Thank you to all of you. And thank you for listening. And Lance, thank you. Thank you for just being the consummate professional that you are.
You're welcome.
I know
you guys are great.
I can speak for Dave too. That Lance, we're both just honored to be on this call with you. So,
I understand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Lance. All right, and that is going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies.
You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram, and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.